Yeah, again, just a welcome to you if you've just joined us. If you've just joined the winter retreat, you're very welcome. So as Vajrashri was saying, last night we had our introduction. So I said a little bit about the retreat. Atulyamitra led a meditation and a dedication. And then this morning at 7 o'clock, we had some meditation with Mochikaya. And here we are at 11 o'clock. And what's going to happen this morning is Atulyamitra is going to introduce us to Padmasambhava. And then we're going to have breakout rooms after that. So that's basically the plan for this morning. And again, what I wanted to do is just actually introduce Atulyamitra a little bit. So Atulyamitra is coming to us from Clougha Head, which is not too far from Drogheda, and she lives there with Dave. And she's been part of our order now for just about, what would it be, 2.5 years, which seems amazing to me. It seems like she's been around in the order for a lot longer. And she's also part of the centre team, so she works with those of us on the centre team. So it's been a real pleasure working with Atulyamitra. And I was just thinking how she joined us in, I think it was about September of 2019. And a few months after that, we went into lockdown, and she's just been like amazingly resourceful, and she's just been up for whatever needs doing, and just really willing to just literally do whatever needs doing. And that seems to be one of the qualities that I've noticed about her. Just really shines through. She's just really willing to do whatever needs doing. She's willing to learn new things if she doesn't know how to do them. But she also brings a whole range of skills and capacities from all the life that she's led up to now. So she's just a really resourceful, responsive person. And I just keep having to remind myself that she's actually not been on the centre team all that long, because she's just so up for the challenge. And the thing I was thinking about, why is that? Why is she so responsive? And why does she do whatever needs doing quite willingly? One thing I want to say is that she's doing that, she's living in a different city. So like, I mean, I'm able to see friends much more easily than she is, but so in a way she's a little bit out on a limb, but she's just been really responsive. And I think the reason she's able to do that is she just really cares about people, and she wants to help people. It's just very, very straightforward part of her nature. She's just really, what she's responding to really is people, and the fact that she knows the Dharma is of benefit to people and it will help people, and she wants to do what she can to make it available. And not just in a sort of in a sense of teaching people how to do things, but actually being there as a friend. So her name actually means unequaled friend. So I think that's right. Pranagita will correct me if I got that wrong. So anyway, I'm just really, really happy that we've got Atulyamitra as part of our team at the Dublin Buddhist Centre, and really happy that she's part of this retreat, and really happy that she's going to be talking to us this morning and introducing us more fully to this mysterious character, Padmasambhava. So yeah, over to you, Atulyamitra. Without further ado, I'll let you take over.
Okay, thank you very much for that introduction. I need to take a breath or two, look behind me to see who it was he was talking about. What I'm going to do now is I'm just going to change the view so that I'm not looking at a very large picture of myself, but I can actually see all your faces. I'm not sure which makes me less nervous, but anyway, we'll go with this. It's lovely to see so many of you here, actually. There's more than 60 of you here again. And so what I'm going to do this morning is I'm going to talk for about a half an hour or so. And I've decided to actually split this talk into 3 sections. So one will be a broad overview of Padmasambhava. One, then I'll move into just talking about my own personal connection with Padmasambhava. And then I'm going to introduce you all on a more personal level to him. In other words, we're going to do a visualization to finish with, and then we're going to move into groups. And I have a couple of questions for you to take into the groups. I decided that I would leave it at 2 because I think the questions are meaty, that there's plenty in there for you to be talking about. So without further ado, I will be looking down some of the time because I like to have notes jotted, and I do it the old-fashioned way. I do it with pen and paper still. So I do look down at my sheets of paper, so you will probably also hear the rustling of paper. It's very difficult, firstly, to actually introduce someone, a great being who in many ways is undefinable. There's lots and lots written about Padmasambhava, but most of it would be in the realm of the mythic, of the imaginal, of wonderful stories. Having a slightly analytical slant to myself as well as a strongly visual slant, I always like to go researching. And I did try to research historically anything I could find on Padmasambhava. There's pretty much nothing out there. Vaguely, we know that he came from an area possibly from Pakistan, as we would know it now. We believe that there is a possibility that there was someone called Padmasambhava who did go to Tibet and who did help bring the Dharma more firmly to that country. But pretty much all of the stories we have are much more imaginal and much more mythical than anything factual. The Tibetans themselves will say that he is real and the stories are real. And that's where we're going to go with this morning. So what I will be doing is talking about him as if I know him as an individual, which is quite funny when you start to hear some of the stories. So another thing about the stories, I think in an overview, and I think Nyanadara did touch on this last night, there's strong imagery, there's strong symbolism in everything about the stories. And we could spend the rest of our lives exploring that symbolism. The colors, the various tools and implements he's seen with in some of the pictures that we have these days of him. The various characters that he meets and interacts with. It's all very, very strongly symbolic. And as I say, we could analyze all of that, but what I prefer to do is actually leave each of you to meet with this being, Padmasambhava, in your own experience and allow the symbolism to unfold in your own understanding. And let's see where that takes you. So he was born of a lotus flower. He's known as Lotus Born. And even that's very interesting, because when you get into the story of him being born of a lotus flower, he was born at the center of a lake of very magical lotus flowers. Word got to the king of this region that this child was living on this lotus flower. This child was the color purple, the purple of seashells. That fascinated me initially, because I thought, why purple? And then as I was sitting with it, I remembered that when we talk about auras, when we talk about chakras and the colors, the color purple is actually associated with the higher chakras, the ones of the mind and beyond. So I just wondered if that was a possibility as to why he was purple. When the king and his ministers rowed out to the center of the lake to speak to this 8-year-old purple child sitting on a lotus, they asked him who his parents were, what nourished him, and why was he here on this lotus flower. And what he said was that his father is great compassion. He said, my mother is the space of great wisdom. I'm nourished by perplexity, and I'm here out of compassion for all living beings. So this small 8-year-old child, these were the words, the first words that he said to these people who met him. His father was great compassion. his mother space of great wisdom. What nourished him was perplexity, and that's significant, I think. And he had come out of compassion for the world. So the king, who was childless, decided anyway that he was going to take this child home, and he was going to raise this child as his own. And what he was going to do then was he was going to eventually let this child become king. There are stories about what happened as Padmasambhava left the lotus pond and went back with the kings. And again, these stories are where this 8-year-old had the insight to know that moving into the life that he was now moving into, he would sooner or later find it very, very restrictive, that he wouldn't be able to do what he was here to do, and that eventually he would have to escape from this life. So anyway, he lived and he grew up, and eventually the time came where he was being moved towards becoming king. And he realized it was time to leave. As I say, there are some wonderful stories in the life and liberation of Padmasambhava if you want to read the details, which are really worth reading. Now, the Buddha, when he decided it was time to leave, he quietly left one night, so the story goes. In the shroud of darkness, he quietly left the city. Not so for Padmasambhava. He decided to do it differently. So what he did was he began to do acts that were increasingly challenging, increasingly horrific to the people, including things like running around the courtyard naked, including even, they say, killing individuals. So eventually the people said, look, you're going to have to do one of two things here. He is going to either have to be killed, or he's going to have to be banished. So the king chose banishment. But again, it wasn't a quiet banishment. It wasn't off you go into the far blue beyond. He was banished to the cremation grounds, to the charnel grounds. And this was exactly what Padmasambhava wanted. So off he went to the charnel grounds, the cremation grounds nearby, which were enormous. And these are places where the dead are taken, where they're burned on funeral pyres, where they're left to rot. It's where wild beasts come to feed on the dead. It's where the spirits, all the unpleasant beings that we know from mythology, all like to hang out in these charnel grounds. And Padmasambhava decided this is where he was happy to be. Here he met many of these weird and wonderful creatures, particularly what we call the Dakinis, the sky dancers. And these particular Dakinis were known as the worldly Dakinis. And what Padmasambhava did in this time was he not only stayed at one charnel ground, he actually moved to 8 major grounds around the country. And it's said that although these places were terrifying, these beings, these Dakinis, were of many colors. They were very fierce. They had eyes everywhere, eyes in their heads, eyes in their bellies, all sorts of interesting places for eyes. They would pull out their entrails and their hearts and eat them. They would dance around carefree, carelessly. They would ride on all sorts of interesting beasts. They would ride on the bodies of the dead. They were just quite terrifying, I think, for any of us if we did meet any of these. But what's said of Padmasambhava was that he was comfortable here. He sat with his back to the stupa being the reliquary where the ashes of Buddhists would be. He sat with his back to this and he watched the dance. He watched this freedom of dance of these great beings in this place that was considered to be dark and frightening and unclean in the culture of India. And this is where he stayed for a number of years. And in this time, he befriended these dakinis, these beings, and he taught them the Dharma. And as he did, because they found he was fearless, because they found that he was willing just to accept them and see them as they were and not be afraid, they began to open up to him. They allowed him to teach them. And they became Dharma practitioners and Dharma protectors. So moving on, all sorts of trouble going on in Tibet. There was a poor monk up there trying to open a large monastery. And he was having all sorts of problems with the local dakinis and demons and nagas and other spirits who didn't want this monastery to be built. And so this monk suggested to the king that the one person who could actually come and deal with the situation was this being Padmasambhava. So Padmasambhava was invited. So off he went to Tibet. Again, there are many stories, some of which we will hear over the course of the week. The stories of how he met the king, the stories of the incredible battles that he had with demons, with ogres, with dragons or serpents, and how, of course, he won each of these battles. He met each of the beings where they were, and he won them over, either by ferociousness or by, particularly with the dakinis, many of them just fell in love with him eventually. Not only did he win them over to the Dharma, but they became protectors of the Dharma. They became protectors of the secret teachings, or the dharmas as we know them now. Now, another thing about when he was in Tibet, what the Tibetans will say themselves is that they were very fierce. They would have been a nomadic people at the time, and but they were also very fond of fierce battles. They believed that had it not been for Padmasambhava softening them up, that they would probably have been on a par with the Mongolians, with their ability to go into battle. But instead, they embraced the Dharma, they embraced Buddhism, and became soft. But also what happened was that these were times of unity and of calm in Tibet, and the people liked this. So eventually the time came when Padmasambhava decided that he had to move on. Padmasambhava never died, he just moved on to other places. Again, these are some of the stories that we'll touch on over the course of the week. So he moved on, leaving the Tibetans quite desolate, very sad, and to this day with a sense of longing, it said, longing for Padmasambhava to return. But what he said to them was that all they had to do was call on him and he would be there. He would be there in times of trouble. I want to break into song there, but I won't. And the interesting thing about Padmasambhava is that when times are particularly difficult, when times are particularly dark, it's believed that his energy, his presence will be here with us and stronger than in the calm times, in the quiet times. He will be there. He will be with us. So that's a broad overview of the story of Padmasambhava. As I say, there are some of the stories that we will be exploring over the course of the retreat, so I'm not going to say much more about them. There are many more stories that you can read, particularly in the life and liberation of Padmasambhava. But one of the questions I've been asking myself is, well, what do all of these stories mean in our own lives? We can get into the symbolism and an understanding of what they mean in the mythology of Tibet. But I honestly feel that it would be more relevant for us to actually be exploring, what does all of this mean to me? And that's why I want to talk a little bit about what my experience of Padmasambhava has been. So when I started coming to the center, Padmasambhava was not on the horizon for me at all. I didn't even know him. Green Tara was the being that I was most familiar with and who I connected with most strongly, even though there was a bit of resistance there initially. But what began to happen was that as my own practice was deepening, as I was moving through the ordination process in particular, and my practice was deepening, and I was delving ever more deeply into the nooks and crannies of my being, the darker places that I didn't necessarily want to go, the more yucky places, I began to have dreams. And these dreams included a great being, Padmasambhava. One of them was I was being, some of you know these stories, but one of them was that I was being told that I was going into an arranged marriage, and I was arguing the point and saying that this wasn't possible for a variety of reasons. But then I turned around and I looked straight into the eyes of Padmasambhava, and all I said was, "Oh, it's you." Unfortunately, I woke up then, so I never quite knew what happened after that. But what did happen was I began to have other dreams or experiences during my meditation practices where I would find myself in his presence, usually at the mouth of a cave. And I knew I needed to go into the cave, but I just wasn't too sure. So eventually I thought, well, I'll go in, here goes what'll happen. And again, what happened for me was that on the surface, nothing in particular seemed to happen. The cave wasn't what I expected. But again, now with hindsight, what was happening was that certainly there was something deeper going on within me, and my practice in general, my spiritual practice was evolving. I can see that now. A point came where I was taking great pleasure in torturing myself in many ways, trying to decide whether I would be well enough, because I have health issues, would I be well enough to do 3 months on a mountain on an ordination training retreat? And I was beginning to think, no, I wouldn't be able to. And then one day I was meditating at the center, and I found myself in this space where my preceptor, Pranagita, I see you here, she was with me, and she was ordaining me. I hadn't got the faintest idea what this ordination was going to be like, but I was having this imaginary image of it. And as she leaned forward to do something, from behind her shoulder, the face of Padmasambhava popped up with that little smile that he has, with that semi-wrathful looking face, which I often think is more mischievous than wrathful. And he just said, "See, I told you could do it." And at that point, I knew that, well, my decision had been made. So I actually then made the decision to go for 3 months. And the rest, we shall say, is history. There were times on the mountain when I would say to him, "Look what you've got me into." But we dealt with that between us. So although I don't actually have a daily practice to Padmasambhava, I do know he's there with me all the time. He's there with me when my practice is deepening. He's there with me to challenge me at times when I'm faltering. And the one thing, again, Nyanadara mentioned this last night, the one thing I would say in my experience that Padmasambhava teaches us or encourages us to do is, no matter what is on the path, no matter what's going on in our day-to-day lives, that is the path. That is our Dharma practice. It doesn't have to look like something in particular. It doesn't have to be, sometimes we think of meditation as being ever so calm and ever so delightful and blissful, especially if we go into the bliss states. It's not always like that, and that's okay. And that's what Padmasambhava is teaching us. It is okay. Whatever's happening in my life today, this is the path. I just need to find my way through it. So that's my personal experience. Yeah, and there's something in there about how all of that is bringing me to a point of, I wanted to draw out integration. So we have those darker aspects of ourselves those aspects that we don't want to know. But it's really, really important for us to turn toward them, to turn toward the unpleasant in our experience. That's our charnel ground. At the moment, we're all living in the charnel grounds with what's going on in the world, worldwide. And we can turn this into something positive. Many of us have over the past few months. We can continue to do that. We can continue to turn this into our practice, to see it as the charnel ground, to lean against the stupa, that representation of the three jewels, and just allow whatever to unfold and find our way through it. And the more we do that, the closer we get to enlightenment ultimately, which I don't know about the rest of you, but personally that is the path I want to stay on. So I'm always aware of the clock. So what I would like to do now is that, as I say, I can talk about the historic aspects, the myths, I can talk about the symbolism, I can tell you my story, or I can introduce you to Padmasambhava in your own experience. So if you would like to perhaps put pens, pencils down and make yourselves comfortable, you don't have to get into meditative pose. You can do this with your eyes open or closed. But we're just going to get to know him a little bit. Once again, with Padmasambhava, of course, there is no one single way to get to know him. I'm actually just going to lead you in a particular visualization. We'll be meeting him in a particular form. He has many different names. Again, we'll hear about the names over the course of the week, or at least some of them. There are 8 major names. Those of you who want to delve further, there's all sorts of interesting things around the number 8 in Padmasambhava's story. His first name is Padmasambhava. His names and his descriptions, those 8 descriptions, then become ever more fierce, ever more wild and awe-inspiring. And I think one of my favorite aspects of him is his 8th name, which is Dorje Drollo, immutable guru with the loose hanging stomach. Now, perhaps that's because I can relate to him, but in other ways, shall we say. But he rides through the jungle of life on a tiger, and the energy of that, or tigress, I should say. He has a halo of flames. He has a ferocious expression. He's garlanded with skulls. He is Padmasambhava, the subduer of demons. So that's one of my favorite images, but that's not the image that we're going to sit with this morning. So what I want you to start to do now is begin to just imagine yourself floating in the blue sky. Beautiful blue sky, whatever color blue, just notice the shade. And out of the blueness, you begin to notice something taking form. It's taking the form of a fiery red lotus. And above the lotus is a sun disk. We don't often meet sun disks, but we have a sun disk here, symbolizing compassionate, skillful means, whatever that means to you. Above that, a moon disk appears, that crystal light of the full moon. And above the moon mat You begin to see light taking form. And it might happen slowly for you. It might happen in a flash. As it does, you begin to see a man sitting here. He's very handsome. He appears to be very blissful. You notice what he's wearing. A brilliant red cloak, very ornate, is his outer robe. Noticing its redness, decorations. Beneath this, the yellow robe of the monk. Reminding us that this being, however bizarre his behaviors seem, he is still following the Buddhist path. He's still keeping his ethical discipline. And beneath the yellow robes, closest to his being, closest to his heart, he wears blue. The blue of ancient royalty. This blue robe is almost hidden, but it's there for you to see if you look. As you continue to take him in, you notice his legs. His left leg is drawn up. His right leg is hanging loosely, relaxed at ease. He's comfortable with whatever is. On his feet, he's wearing Tibetan-style boots. You notice his right hand is resting on his right knee. And in his hand, he's holding the Vajra of truth. But he's holding it in a particular way. He's holding it between his thumb and his middle fingers, so that his index and little fingers are pointing outwards straight. And this is the mudra of warding off demons and enemies. You notice his left hand. In it is a skull cup. The top of the skull holding blood red colored liquid. This is Amrita, the nectar of great bliss, of great life. Noticing your response to this. Is there curiosity, surprise, horror, or something else? Continuing to move your eyes upwards, you notice that in the crook of his left elbow, he's holding a staff, a trident. It's known as the Katfanga. You notice lots of things hanging from it. There seems to be medals of some sort. A Vajra, a double Vajra, in fact. You notice that there are 3 human heads on this. One is a freshly severed head, one decomposing, and one a skull. There's a flaming halo around this trident. As you continue to move your eyes upward, you notice he's wearing a lotus cap. It's red. It's got ear flaps coming down over its ears. On the front of it are 5 jewels. They're shaped, laid out like a mandala. The center is a white jewel. Surrounding it, brilliant jewels of red, blue, green, yellow. Above the jewels, a crescent moon. With a gold sun sitting above that. At the top of the hat, there's a half a Vajra and a vulture's feather. And as you continue to take in the appearance of this man, you start to notice his face, the dark colored hair, the mustache, the small pointy beard. You notice his smile, There's a kindliness about it, a compassion about this smile. And yet his face almost looks wrathful as you begin to look into his eyes. They're looking straight at you, almost as if they can see right into your heart. His gaze is deep but inviting. Inviting you to be with him, to follow him on the path. You might even notice a white Om at his forehead. A fiery red Ah at his throat. And a deep blue Hum at his heart. He can lead you directly to enlightenment if you're willing to go with him, wherever that takes you. Knowing that his love for all living beings will protect you. And with that knowledge, this image of Padmasambhava begins to fade, begins to dissolve into light once again. And as it dissolves into light, into the blue sky, you have a knowing that he will be with you if you call. So you allow the blue sky to dissolve. Bringing your attention to your breath. To your body. Noticing the contact of the seat beneath you. And slowly and gently, in your own time, bringing your practice to a close. And so that's your first, perhaps your first for some of you, introduction to Padmasambhava. For some of you, it might be a reintroduction, getting to know him deeper. So as we move into groups now, I do have those 2 questions, which I will type up into the box. So how do you relate to Padmasambhava? Or sorry, do you relate to him? And if so, how? Might be visual, might be his qualities. It might be some of the stories, the imagery. And it might simply be that you don't. And the second question is a question that you might like to come back to over the course of the week. It's how can you bring the stories or qualities of Padmasambhava into your daily life, into your own experience? So I will now finish up and mute myself and frantically type those questions into the chat box for you all.
I've already got them ready to go, Atulyamitra, if you want me to share them now.
That's great. Thanks. Thank you.